Hey folks, welcome back. I want to just dive into this video with a couple of questions for y'all. We're going to go through some dual type Pokemon and ask the question, if these Pokemon had a primary type and a secondary type, which would be which? Starting with the very first Pokemon in the Pokédex 001, Bulbasaur, and this fellow's entire evolutionary line are dual grass and poison types, and we want to answer which would be the primary type and which would be the secondary type. It feels like it's gotta be primary grass and secondary poison just because it's part of that time-tested fire, water, grass starter trio. What about something like Breloom, the very first grass fighting type? Well, if we flash back to its pre-evolution Shroomish, we see that that's a pure grass type, so maybe it makes sense that the fighting type was kinda just added on upon evolution? But it starts getting trickier even when we think about something as simple as the Magnemite line, who are electric steel. They started as pure electric in Generation 1 before steel was a thing, so we can look at it like steel was added on later, making it the secondary type, but if you kinda just look at these guys in a vacuum, they look like blobs of steel that just happen to generate electricity, so there's kind of a case for both. Clearly we need some more quantitative way to tell, for any dual type, what is its primary type and what is its secondary type. As I was brainstorming how we would do this, I actually came up with two methods, and I was trying to decide for the longest time which one I wanted to talk about. But then I remembered part of why I love math is that there's different ways you can approach the same problem, so in the spirit of that, let's just share both of them. When I asked you all in a recent community post who your favorite dual type was, one of the most popular answers was the quintessential ghost type mascot Gengar. But let's not forget that this guy is also a poison type. So take your guess of what you think the primary and what you think the secondary type are going to be. The initial way I thought about figuring this out was to use the Pokemon stats. Yes, Gengar is both a ghost and a poison type, but looking at its stats, does it look more like a pure ghost type or look like a pure poison type? To figure that out, let's pretend like Pokemon just have two stats for a second, attack and defense, and plot those stats for all of the pure ghost types in the game through all the 9 generations, and all the pure poison types in the game from all 9 generations. We exclude those special categories of mons here like mythicals and legendaries, ultra beasts, paradox, just to keep things more grounded. And then this star here is Gengar. Looking at this, we see that of Gengar's 5 closest neighbors stats-wise, 3 of them are pure ghost types and 2 of them are pure poison types, so purely numbers-wise, it seems like Gengar is more similar to the pure ghost types than to the pure poison types. In this example, one nuance we should note is that the number of pure ghost types and number of pure poison types in the game are pretty similar, around a dozen of each. But thinking to cases like Empoleon, which is water and steel, and there's clearly way more water types in the game than steel types, we should make a small tweak here. Since the more rare types are going to have a harder time being the neighbors of the mon in question, just because they're in the minority, we should make up for that by giving those neighbors a higher weight, giving them more votes. And that's basically how this first method works. We look at the 5 closest stats neighbors of the mon in question and take a weighted vote to see which pure type this mon is more similar to. Of course, we're going to extend this to all 6 stats, and we find the result still holds. Of Gengar's 5 closest neighbors, 3 are pure ghost types and 2 are pure poison types, and the final vote is that Gengar is a primary ghost type and a secondary poison type. Now this all makes enough sense, but we're clearly missing something huge, right? A Pokemon's stats are clearly important, they define the mon's inherent strengths and weaknesses, but what about their moves? A huge part of any dual type's identity is whether it gets more moves of one type or the other. That move pool dictates which tools this mon is going to have at its disposal during a battle. So the other way we can answer this question is, hey, does Gengar get more moves that a pure ghost type would have, or more moves that a pure poison type would have? What we do is we take all of the moves that the pure ghost types in the game have and calculate their frequency. And we do the same exact thing for all the pure poison types in the game. Then we go through Gengar's level up moveset, and for each move, we assign the probability that this move would belong to a pure ghost type's level up moveset, versus the probability this move would belong to a pure poison type's level up moveset. Multiplying all of these probabilities gives us the overall likelihood that Gengar's moveset belongs more to a pure ghost type moveset or belongs more to a pure poison type moveset. One quick note here is that more weight is given to moves later in the level up moveset, since early moves that a mon learns are usually just there to be replaced later when a better move becomes available. So no matter which way we slice it here, Gengar is definitively a primary ghost type and a secondary poison type. But what about when the two methods don't agree? Let's tell the story of Swampert, the very first water type starter to take on a dual type upon its final evolution. If we go through the move-based method, we find pretty strongly that Swampert is a primary water type and a secondary ground type, due in large part to the dominance of water type moves in its moveset. But if we look at the stat-based method, we find something pretty interesting. 4 of Swampert's 5 closest neighbors are water type, its fully evolved water starter type cousins Feraligatr and Blastoise, and then also Politoed and Octillery. And just one of these neighbors is a pure ground type, Hippowdon. But because pure water types outnumber pure ground types 6 to 1, we give any neighbor that happens to be a pure ground type 6 votes, and any neighbor who happens to be a pure water type just 1 vote, which actually makes the conclusion here from the stats-based method that Swampert is a primary ground type and a secondary water type. I'm really curious to hear what you think about that conclusion in the comments section below. I want to go through a few more of these just to give you a sense of these methods. One interesting case is going back to Magneton. Really interestingly, just as with our gut feeling, it was a little bit hard to figure out which the primary and secondary types would be, the math actually reflects this ambiguity. The stat-based method literally gives us a tie, and the moves-based method is really close to a tie, which isn't surprising when you look at Magneton's very balanced moveset. Volcarona is another cool case. Looking at its moves, we see that a really good balance is there between the fire and bug type moves, making this a dead tie. But that tie sways in the fire direction looking at the stats method, with 4 of the 5 closest neighbors being pure fire types and just Illumise being its closest bug type neighbor. On the other end of the spectrum is something like Venusaur, which looking at either method is definitely and reassuringly a primary grass type with a secondary poison type. Now obviously there are way too many dual type Pokemon in the game to go through every single one in this video, but what we did a while back was ask you all in a community post what your favorite dual type Mons are, and we got way more input than I was even expecting, and so we're going to close this video by scrolling through all of those Mons in the comments and posting their primary and secondary types according to both methods that we discussed in the video. And while we're doing that, I wanted to think about how the gameplay of Pokemon would change if we formally introduced the idea of a primary and secondary type for each dual type Mon. Right now, nothing in the game distinguishes between a Mon's 2 types, they're just the same. But let's change that. Taking our pal Gengar again, now with a primary ghost and a secondary poison typing, offensively we'd have that the stab for the primary type would be 75% and the stab for the secondary type would be 25%. So these two still kind of average out to the 50% stab we have today, but it's just that the Mon is able to take more advantage of stab from its primary type and less advantage of stab from its secondary type. Defensively, damage from incoming super effective attacks would be 2.5 times for the primary type and only 1.5 times for the secondary type. Damage from not very effective attacks would be 0.2x for the primary type and 0.67x for the secondary type. To see how this would affect the game concretely, let's take the case of Breloom and Chestnut, which are both grass fighting types, but using our move-based method, we actually see them pretty differently. Breloom becomes a primary fighting secondary grass, while Chestnut is just the opposite. Let's say they both get hit by an incoming flamethrower. Chestnut, being primarily grass, takes 2.5x damage, while Breloom, being only secondary grass, takes only 1.5x damage. Chestnut gets punished more for its primary typing, while Breloom is somewhat protected by its primary typing. On the other hand, if they both get hit by an incoming Hydro Pump, Chestnut takes only 0.2x damage, while Breloom takes 0.67x damage. Here, Chestnut is actually shielded by its primary typing, while Breloom takes more damage than usual because Grass is only its secondary typing. And folks, that's what Pokemon would look like if each dual type Mon had a primary and secondary type. If you like this video, please like and subscribe for more videos just like this. Really want to hear in the comments section below how you would expand on this or change things up, so go ahead and leave those comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see all of you wonderful people next time.